be in so that you see the posters?
Right.
I'll hang out here. Where you want to be, Kat? You want to be in the middle? Sure.
Well, good afternoon. We're all members of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we're here today because HHS Secretary Becerra has failed to follow the Constitution and the law. There's been a complete breakdown of accountability at the agency that has lost the trust of the American people, especially during COVID-19. 14 NIH officials, including Dr. Fauci, held unlawful positions and exercised authority that they didn't have, which included approving $26 billion in grants. This is unprecedented, and it calls into question the validity of every decision that these officials have made since December 2021 to June 2023, including Dr. Fauci's awarding a new grant to EcoHealth Alliance, which is But what is even more egregious has been Health and Human Services cover-up. For more than a year, the administration has misled our committee throughout this investigation, and our question has been a pretty simple one. Can you show us the documents that Secretary Becerra followed the Constitution and the law in reappointing these 14 senior officials who exercised immense power and authority? The question, can you show us the documents? And we're still waiting. There needs to be accountability. No one is above the law. Americans need to know that their tax dollars are being spent responsibly, effectively, and lawfully, and that the people making these decisions are lawfully authorized to make them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chairman of the Oversight and Investigations Subcommittee, Morgan Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I adopt all the things that Chairwoman Rogers just said. But let me say this. This is very frustrating. It is typical of the Biden administration not to follow the rules, not to pay attention to the law. This law was put in as a good governance section. The reappointment of these agency heads was put in as a good government section of 21st Century Cures. And the idea was, let's take a look at various bureaucrats and make sure that they're being reappointed, and not reappointed as a matter of course, and not reappointed by somebody below the secretary, but reappointed by the secretary. And he didn't do it. And we didn't see any evidence of it, so we wrote a letter 16 months ago and said, hey, what's going on? These people don't appear to have been reappointed. And they've basically played a shell game since then until a couple of weeks ago, saying, oh, yeah, it's all right, everything's okay, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, it's all fine. And then suddenly, eventually they must have gotten around to realizing they were in violation of the law, and so they tried to do it retroactively. But everything, as the chairwoman said, from the end of December of 2021 until about 2 weeks ago, is now called into question. Every programmatic decision, every policy decision, and every grant award has question marks around it now, and I suspect the American taxpayers are going to pay millions of dollars defending lawsuits from various groups and various organizations that think they were either done wrong or they didn't like the policies that came out during that time period, because now it's clear that the administration and Secretary Becerra did not follow the clear meaning, the clear wording of the law. And unfortunately, this administration continues to do that, and it needs to stop. And that's part of why we have Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, so we can find out what's going wrong and try to get it fixed and try to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's why getting the word out so that the administration knows this is not the way to run the shop. And we got to get it right. And I will now introduce my colleague who's been working on this with me. Brett Guthrie is chair of the Health Subcommittee. Thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for your work and the chair's work and the committee's work. But for more than a year, Dr. Fauci, a highly paid public employee at the time, served unlawfully and without proper appointment. It was during this period he awarded a new grant to EcoHealth Alliance and serves as the chief medical advisor to President Biden's COVID-19 response team. In this role as top COVID advisor, he used his position to recommend mandates. It is unfair to the American people that while he held this position unlawfully, he used his platform to be the voice of science and shame those who with alternative point of views, in addition to push for questionable public health guidance policies. This is a complete breakdown of accountability at an agency that has lost the American people's trust, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. This also calls into question every decision each one of these 14 individuals made during the time. Greater accountability is needed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And just before we move to the Q&A, I wanted to address HHS's latest statement on their failure to follow the law, because they've changed their story many times, and their latest defense is also not true. So they are referencing an entirely different process, what is called Title 42 Special Consultants. And this is different than what we are talking about as far as the requirement for the reappointment or the appointment of IC directors. IC directors require the Secretary's approval, and HHS should know the difference, and they can't hide behind this claim. But it's after a year-long investigation that we've not seen the evidence that the administration we've not seen evidence that other administrations, so they're claiming right now that other administrations have failed to follow this reappointment process. We do not see that evidence. They are conflating. There's two issues. There's the Title 42 special consultants, and then there is the process of appointing or reappointing the IC directors. And we wouldn't be here today if the administration had come clean in March of 2022, recognizing that they needed to get right with the law. So with that, I'll ask or answer some questions. Yes.
What kind of, going forward here, is there a legislative step for your committee to take to address this? Like you said, you want to prevent this from happening in the future. What kind of steps can your committee specifically take to prevent this from happening? And also, looking back, is there anything that can be done to rectify what may have happened in the last 2 years, and to punish who you say is responsible for this?
Well, what we need are answers, and we need the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Becerra, to answer the questions that we have. We need to know if this was willful or if this was negligence. We need to find out if it is lawful for him to appoint these individuals retroactively. So we need to get answers to these questions, but this is all a part of accountability. Ultimately, this is about accountability on behalf of the taxpayers and ensuring that taxpayer dollars are being spent lawfully, and it's accountability by the elected representatives in Congress of the agency. And no, this is just one example of it seems there's more and more arrogance in the agencies, among agency secretaries and officials, that they don't have to follow the law.
And if I might add to that.
Oh, yes, please.
And if I might add to that, one, shining the light on it's important. Two, I don't think it is proper to retroactively appoint somebody who's making decisions at this level. But if a court were to determine that, how do you retroactively appoint people who are no longer there? And the answer is I don't think you can do that. So even if the courts were to say, well, you can retroactively appoint those people who are still there, how do you, 6 months after retirement, suddenly reappoint Dr. Fauci to a position that he's already left? I don't think you can do it.
Okay, in the back.
Are you investigating any other appointments within HHS, or are you just focused on NIH?
Do you want to handle?
NIH is where we focused at this point. I mean, we're looking at all kinds of things, and there are so many issues going on in HHS that there may be others later, but not that I have, in my back pocket that I'm holding on to for some reason. I mean, obviously we've been investigating the actions at ORR, but I don't know of any appointment problems there at this moment. But we may find more as we move forward.
Yeah. Yes.
Does the committee or do individual members of the committee plan to support any of these potential legal actions against specific policies or appointments or grants?
Well, at this point, I think as the chair, Griffith, just said, shining the light on it. We have questions that we want to get answered before really determining what those next steps are. And we have the secretary has a couple of weeks to respond, and he'll also be before the committee at the end of the month. Yes.
You said that you hadn't found any evidence of the HHS claim that other previous administrations have failed to make these appointments.
Yes.
Does that mean it looks like previous administrations did take the steps of properly appointing everyone? Is it there's actual?
Yes.
physical evidence there, it's not just a not being able to find anything.
Yes, right. Yeah, we have evidence that previous administrations have properly followed the law in appointing these individuals.
Thank you. Last question.
Yes, yes.
What are the implications for the 26 billion in research funds that you mentioned? Does this mean like you want to take them back? You want to like get someone to reauthorize the grants? Like what does that kind of look like?
Well, it does raise the question around the decisions that were made approving grants by individuals that are not lawfully in their role. So it is an abuse of power by an unlawful individual, and we're this is uncharted territory. So, but we're going to continue to pursue answers and ultimately figure out what we can be doing to make sure that the agencies are accountable. Yep. Okay.
Sorry, it's catching up here. I know that obviously Dr. Fauci's not in his position anymore, but there are some of these 14 who are. Is there a process for, since they're not under your investigation legally allowed to be there, for removing them that you guys are looking at? Or what is kind of the recourse if they're not legally in these positions?
Well, I think this really is about accountability. This is about good government. We gave the agency, we brought this, we asked for the documents. Early on, the Secretary, Becerra, could have made this right early on in March of 2022, but chose not to be honest with this committee. They first answered and lied to us and said that these appointments had been made legally. And then NIH and Health and Human Services, we asked for the documents. They still didn't turn them over. Instead, they gave us this chart that was, again, misleading Congress, but not the documents. And then just a couple of weeks ago, he made these retroactive appointments. So this is an accountability measure this is accountability ultimately for the taxpayers, hardworking taxpayers across this country, and Congress making sure that these agencies are following the law. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I think that's right, and I would say that, the ones who are still there, they did get lawfully appointed a couple of weeks ago. So you have this gap period where I think they probably do have to go back. Any monies that haven't gone out, they've got to reauthorize everything that they're already doing, and each various program may have different steps that third parties who didn't get the grant, who were vying for the grant, may now have grounds to challenge whether or not those grants were not awarded to them and awarded to somebody else. I think it's just a huge mess, and it could have all been avoided. And what drives you crazy is, and as the chairwoman has said, it could have been 2.5 months. Could have been 2.5 months of fixing the problems, which is pretty easy. Instead, we have 1.5 years. This is a big cow pie in the field, and they just stepped in it and stomped in it and acted like it was fun and games until 2 weeks ago.
Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.